This film, which came out towards the beginning of the year, depicts a harrowing day of combat in the midst of the Iraq War. While far from perfect, it did succeed in violently thrusting the audience into the horrors of war. Hello, and welcome back to another installment of Film Friday, in which I review a new film every single week. This week we're looking at the 2025 film entitled Warfare, directed by Ray Mendoza and Alex Garland and starring Will Poulter. Let's get into it. In some ways, this film works as a companion piece to Alex Garland's 2024 film Civil War, which focused more on the civilian experience of war, with soldiers and combat taking a back seat. Here, that dynamic is flipped. At the beginning of the film, a group of Navy SEALs break into and commandeer a civilian residence in the middle of the night in order to set it up as an observation post. The next morning, as they monitor the market across the street, they notice a group of able-bodied men assembling in one of the houses nearby, along with some weapons. Not long after, a grenade is thrown through their window and a skirmish breaks out. Once the combat starts, it does not relent or give pause basically until the film ends. Now, this film did receive a fair amount of criticism, in part due to its lack of over-dramatized plot, but also because some viewed it as a pro-war propaganda piece. While that may have been the filmmaker's intention going into making this film, I don't know if it was or what their motivations were. That certainly was not the impression with which I was left when I exited the theater. In fact, quite the opposite. Rather, I found this to be a piece which stood in sharp contrast to the type of war film which glorifies combat, or at the very least depicts the heroic actions of those in battle. Instead, Warfare depicts these 24 hours of combat as horrific and utterly pointless. Ultimately, nothing is accomplished. There's no ground won, no prisoner rescued. Several of the soldiers are brutally injured, and those who survive unscathed likely are terribly traumatized for the rest of their lives. To be fair to the critics, it is true that at no point in this film did a Navy SEAL stand up and deliver a buzzword-filled anti-propaganda speech denouncing the war. Obviously, such a scene would have been very out of place, felt extremely forced, and completely disrupted the tone and pacing of the entire film. But if that's what the critics were looking for, I can see how they might be disappointed. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, I don't think this film should sit above criticism, not by any means. It was far from perfect. Rather, I found that this film struggled more with the pacing of the story than anything else. Pretty much the entire first act of Warfare consists of the Navy SEALs sitting in the house they've commandeered, and waiting. And then waiting some more. And we, as the audience, sit alongside them, also waiting for something to happen. Now, perhaps that was the point of this portion of the film, but if so, it was poorly executed. The nervous tension which could have been conveyed so strongly by such a scene was completely missing. Perhaps that was due to the fact that it was not wholly clear what exactly they were waiting for until right before it happened. I can understand the fear of unnecessary exposition, especially in a war film of this type. But sometimes a little exposition is undeniably necessary. And as short as this film was, it had a runtime in total of about 95 minutes, I still think it could have been even shorter and still perfectly conveyed its point to the audience. However, despite this, there were many things I did like about Warfare. In particular, its outstanding sound design. A specific sequence was especially impressive, in particular in an IMAX theater, when he essentially entered the ear of a recently shelled soldier. His hearing has not yet returned to normal, and you feel how utterly overwhelmed he is by the chaos of the soldiers around him and the blood-curdling screams of the severely wounded soldier beside him. All in all, while I found this film to be very well made in many ways, it is not one which I am particularly eager to rewatch. I'm also hesitant to recommend it, mainly due to its intense brutality. It certainly is not a film which indulges in gore for its own sake, but it is also not one for the faint of heart. With that being said, thank you for watching, and be sure to comment your own thoughts on this film below. And don't forget to subscribe for more movie commentary and reviews.